So these are the notes for elimination method part 2. Our main question over here, what if there are no common coefficients? Let's go ahead and answer that question. If there are no common coefficients, what you have to do is multiply one or both equations by some number to create opposites. So one variable is eliminated and other variable can be solved. So let's go ahead and write that out. I know it's a lot. That's all going to fit in those 3 lines there. Multiply one or both equations by some number to create opposites. So one variable is eliminated. And other variable can be solved. Okay, so that's kind of like your basic answer to the question. The question is, what if there are no common coefficients? What you need to do is multiply one or both equations by some number to create opposites. So one variable is eliminated and other variable can be solved, which we kind of sort of did that already. We multiplied one of the equations by -1 on our last set of notes and assignment. This time, instead of multiplying by -1, we're going to multiply by another number like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, some other number that's not 1. So it's going to be a little bit more work in the beginning. But once you do that first step, from there, you just solve your problem just like we did on the last set of notes and assignment. So we have 5 examples on here. We're going to go through them all together. Our first one, number 1, we have our 2 equations, the x plus 3y equals 6. And 2x minus 7y equals -1. So just like we did before, you first want to double check, are they lined up? Are the x's on top of each other? Are the y's on top of each other? And are the constants on top of each other? The answer is yes, everything is all lined up. Let's double check. Do we have any opposites? Are the x values opposites? For the first equation, we have a positive 1x. In the second equation, we have a positive 2x. Those are not opposites. So let's look at our y values. We have a positive 3y and a negative 7y. Again, those are also not opposites. Okay? So what we need to do for this one, since we don't even have any of the same numbers, our x's, we have an invisible 1 and 2. Those are different numbers. And then if you're looking at your y values here, we have a 3 and a 7. Those are also different numbers. We need to multiply one of these equations by a number that's not 1. Okay, so the way we're going to figure out what number we need to multiply by is let's look at our 2 equations. Here's our first equation and our second equation. We're going to look for the coefficient. We're going to look for a coefficient that has an invisible 1. So remember, a coefficient is the number that's in front of your variable. So for like this here, the coefficient of 2x is 2. The coefficient of x is 1. Okay, so let's look at our 2 equations. We have our first equation and our second equation. Which equation has the coefficient with the x or the y, has an invisible coefficient of 1? Which equation, the first one or the second one, has an invisible coefficient 1? The first equation or the second equation? So if you're looking here, our first equation, the variable x has the coefficient of invisible 1. So this is the one that we're going to be looking at, and we're going to multiply this top equation by some number. So let's figure out what number we're going to multiply by. We can see that our top equation has the coefficient of invisible 1, and that variable that has the coefficient of 1 is x. So now that we know that the top equation in our x has the invisible 1, we know we're going to eventually eliminate our x values, but you need to look at your other equation, okay? So we know we're going to eliminate our x's. We have the invisible 1 and our 2x. Instead of multiplying the top number by -1, our top equation by -1, we're actually going to multiply our top equation by the opposite of +2. And what is the opposite of +2? -2. We're going to multiply the top equation by the opposite coefficient of the other equation. You multiply the equation with the invisible coefficient of 1, you multiply that equation by the opposite coefficient of the other equation. Okay, so let's rewrite this first equation. And when we do this, we're going to distribute. So let's distribute -2 times x. I'm going to write it over here, -2x. And then my second jump, -2 times +3y. -2 times +3 is -6. And then we have that variable y. And then we have one more thing to distribute. -2 times +6 is -12. Okay, so we just distributed, we multiplied that entire equation by the opposite coefficient of the variable we're going to eliminate. We multiplied by the opposite of +2, which was -2. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite that second equation next to it underneath 2x. I'm rewriting this one. 2x minus 7y equals -1. Okay, so now let's double check. Do we have opposites now? Let's look at our x values. Are the x values opposites now? We have a -2x and a +2x. Are those opposites? Yes or no? Go ahead and write that in the chat for me, please. And remember, in order for it to be an opposite, it needs different signs. So there needs to be a negative and a positive in the same number. And these here, the -2x and +2x, they are opposites. So we can go ahead and start eliminating. We know we're going to eliminate our x values, so let's cross those off. And then let's start adding the rest of our equation. We're going to take this -6y plus -7y. And what is -6y plus -7y? Go ahead and write in the chat for me, please. What is -6y plus -7y? So they're both negative, so same signs, add and keep. Add those numbers, keep the negative, and don't forget the variable y. And then let's keep on going. We have -12 plus -1. What is -12 plus -1? Go ahead and write in the chat, what is -12 plus -1? Remember, same signs, add and keep. Add those numbers, keep the negative sign, and you should get -13. Okay, so now we're just going to continue solving like we did earlier this week. We know we can read this as -13 times y, so I'm going to do the opposite. Divide by -13 on both sides, so then y equals -13 divided by -13, we know is a +1. Okay, so we got y equals 1. Now we got to finish solving the rest of this problem. I'm going to take this y equals 1 and I'm going to plug it into either one of these equations here. Let's figure out which of our equations looks a little bit easier to work with. Which one has less numbers? Which one is easier, the first equation or the second equation? Which one looks a little bit easier, has like less numbers? I'm going to let you guys pick which equation should we use for plugging it in, the top one or the bottom one, or you can write first or second. Which one looks easier, or which one would you use for solving the rest of this problem. So I saw a couple people answered, and most people said the first equation, which was x plus 3y equals 6. I agree. I also think that's the easier equation because there's no coefficient for that variable x. Let's go ahead and use this one here. And I'm going to take this 1 and I'm going to plug it into this equation. Where should the 1 go? In the x or in the y? Go ahead and write in the chat, where should the 1 go? In the x or in the y? Since y equals 1, we're going to take it and plug it into our variable y. So let's go ahead and rewrite our problem. X plus 3, plug it in, write down the rest of the equation. And then we can go ahead and solve the rest of our problem here. Next is multiplying this 3 times 1 is 3. Write down the rest of the problem. Now we need to get rid of this plus 3, so I'm going to do the opposite, minus 3 on both sides. So then we end up with x equals 6 minus 3 is 3, so x equals 3. Let's go ahead and write down our final answer. Let's pick, we'll do pink. We'll write our final answer, x comma y. How can I write my final answer? Would I write 1, 3 or 3, 1? What is my final answer as x comma y? Go ahead and write in the chat. What is my final answer? Awesome, good job. First is our x, which is 3, then our y value, which is 1. So this right here, this x comma y, 3 comma 1 in parentheses, that's your final answer. So if we were to graph this like we did 2 weeks ago, we know that they're intersecting, and there's only one solution at that point here, which would be the 3, 1. If you were to graph it, that's what it would look like. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to our next problem. The first step is the hardest. So let's look at our 2 equations here. And let's check and see, do we have opposites, our x values? We have a positive 9x and positive 2x. Those are not opposites. And then let's look at our y values. We have a positive 3y and a positive y. Again, those are also not opposites. Okay, so we need to multiply. Let's look for our variable that has the coefficient of invisible 1. Which equation has the coefficient of invisible 1? The top equation or the bottom equation? Or you can see the first one or the second one. Which one has a coefficient of invisible 1? You can say first or second, or you can say top or bottom. And we're looking for the equation that has a coefficient of invisible 1. And remember, a coefficient is the number in front of the variable. And the correct answer would be our second one here. This one has the coefficient of invisible 1, our y value. So we know we're going to eliminate our y value. Okay. So since we know we're eliminating our y value here, we need to multiply that entire equation by the opposite of positive 3. What is the opposite of positive 3? Go ahead and write in the chat. What is the opposite of positive 3? You can write in the chat. What is the opposite of positive 3? Write in the chat for me, please. Awesome. The opposite of positive 3 is negative 3. So we're going to multiply that entire second equation by negative 3. Okay, let's go ahead and distribute. Our first jump, negative 3 times positive 2x is negative 6x. And then our second jump, negative 3 times positive y is negative 3y. And then our last jump, negative 3 times positive 5, we get negative 15. Okay, so I just rewrote that second equation. After distributing, we got our final answer here in red. I'm going to rewrite this one so it's next to it so they're not so far from each other. I'm just rewriting the same exact thing. 9x plus 3y equals 12. I just rewrote the same thing. Okay. So let's double check. Make sure that we did this correct. We said we're going to eliminate our y values. Are the y values opposites now? Positive 3y and negative 3y, are they opposites now? Yes or no? Are positive 3y and negative 3y opposites? I remember opposites need to have different signs and the same number in order for it to be opposites. And the correct answer for this is yes, they are opposites. Let's go ahead and eliminate our y values. I'm going to do red. We know we're going to eliminate our y values. So let's go ahead and add up the rest of our problem here. 9x plus negative 6x. What is 9x plus negative 6x? So go ahead and write in the chat, what is 9x plus negative 6x? And for this, you should get 3x. Don't forget your variable x. We said that the y values are eliminated, so we can just bring down our equal sign. And then our last part here, we have 12 plus negative 15. And what is 12 plus negative 15? Go ahead and write it in the chat for me, please. What is 12 plus negative 15? Awesome, good job. That is negative 3. And then we're just going to continue solving like we did earlier this week. We know this is 3 times x, so we're going to do the opposite. Divide by 3. So then x equals negative 3. Whoops. Negative 3 divided by a positive 3 is negative 1. So we got part of our answer. And then we're going to take this negative 1, and we can plug it into either equation. It doesn't matter which one. Which one would you guys choose? Which one looks a little bit easier? Which one has less numbers or smaller numbers? The top equation or the bottom equation? Or you can say the first one or the second one. Which one would you use to plug in that negative 1? Which one looks a little bit easier? I see we got second equation. I agree. I also think the second equation is a little bit easier. So let's use that one. 2x plus y equals 5. And again, you can still use the first one and still get the correct answer as long as you do it correct. But let's pick the easier one, because the easier it is, the more likely you are to get it correct and you're not going to make mistakes. So I'm going to take this negative 1 and we're going to plug it into our x because it says x equals negative 1. So we have 2 times negative 1 plus y equals 5. And then let's finish solving this equation. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Bring down the rest of it. Now we need to get rid of this negative 2, so I'm going to do the opposite. Add 2 to both sides. So then we get y equals 5 plus 2 is 7. Okay, so now we need to write out our final answer as x comma y, where x comes first, which is negative 1, then my y value, which is 7. Okay? So our final answer for number 2 would be negative 1 comma 7. And just like number 1, these lines, if we were to graph it, they would be intersecting with one solution at the point negative 1, 7. Okay, let's go on to our next one, number 3. So we have our x's and our y's. Do we have any opposites here? Are the x's opposites? Are the y's opposites? Are there any opposites? Yes or no? Go ahead and write in the chat for me, please. Are there any opposites? And remember, opposite needs to have different signs and same numbers. It needs to have different signs and same numbers. And for both of these here, the x's and the y's, neither one of them are opposites. Okay, so let's look for our equation. Which equation, the first one or the second one, has the coefficient of invisible 1? Which equation has the coefficient of invisible 1? The first one or the second one? Go ahead and write in the chat for me, please. Which equation has the coefficient of invisible 1? The first equation or the second equation? Awesome. Correct answer is the first equation. The y value has the coefficient of invisible 1. Okay, so that means we need to multiply this top equation by the opposite of positive 4. What is the opposite of positive 4? Write your answer in the chat, please. What is the opposite of positive 4? What is the opposite of positive 4? Also, the opposite of positive 4 is negative 4. So we're going to multiply the top equation by negative 4. Okay, so let's go ahead and distribute negative 4 times 3x. What is negative 4 times positive 3x? Tell me in the chat, please. What is negative 4 times positive 3x? Negative times a positive is negative, and then 4 times 3 is 12, and then you just put the x right there next to it. And let's keep on going. Our next is negative 4 times negative 1y. Negative times a negative is positive. And then 4 times 1 is 4. And then we have our y, bring down the equal sign. And then our last jump, negative 4 times positive 14. A negative times a positive is negative, and then 4 times 14 is 56. So let's rewrite this other equation so it's next to it. So they're next to each other so you can see it a little bit better. We have 5x plus 4y equals 12. All right, so let's check and see. Do we have opposites now? Are the x's opposites? The one that, let's see, the one that I have circled now, are the x values opposites? In order for it to be opposite, we need different signs and same number. Different signs and same number. And the x value is correct. They are not opposites. So let's look at our y values. Our y values here, are those opposites? Positive 4y and positive 4y. Remember, opposites need to have different signs and the same number. And again, these are also not opposites. So we need to go back and do kind of what we did earlier this week, is let's change the signs of one equation. Let's go through and let's change the sign of our first equation. I showed you guys the little trick yesterday, so let's kind of do the same thing. We're going to change the sign of our top equation to the opposite sign. The opposite of negative 12x is positive 12x. And then the opposite of positive 4y is negative 4y. And then our last one, the opposite of negative 56 is positive 56. So instead of rewriting the entire thing, I just went through and I changed our signs. I just squished it in there that we don't have to rewrite the entire thing. Now let's check and see, do we have opposites? Are the x values opposites? These ends here are not opposites because they're different numbers and same signs. They're both positive. Let's look at our y values now. Are the y values opposites? Remember, opposites need to have different signs, a negative and a positive, and the same number, 4 and 4. So this one, our y's are opposites. Let's go ahead and eliminate our y values. And then let's add the rest of the equation together. We have 12x plus 5x. And what is 12x plus 5x? You're just going to add those two numbers together. 12 plus 5 is 17. Here's my variable x. Bring down the equal sign. And let's keep on going. We have 56 plus 12. And what is 56 plus 12? And we get 68. One more step to solve for x. What can I do to both sides? Go ahead and write in the chat. What should I do to both sides to solve for x? Should I add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Tell me in the chat, please. What should I do next? Since we read this as 17 times x, we're going to do the opposite. Awesome. So divide by 17. So then x equals 68 divided by 17, and we get 4. Okay, let's take our answer, this 4, and we're going to plug it into our easier equation. It looks like the first one, the 3x minus y equals 14. That one looks a little bit easier. I'm going to take this 4 and plug it into our x. So it's 3 times 4 minus y equals 14. And then let's start simplifying. 3 times 4 is 12. Bring down the rest of it. We need to get rid of this positive 12. So I'm going to do the opposite, minus 12 on both sides. Then we have a negative 1y equals 14 minus 12 is 2. Don't forget that negative sign in front of the y. And I put my 1 there because it's nice to see a number. It's going to help you guys eliminate that negative sign. And we know this is negative 1 times y, so I'm going to do the opposite, divide by negative 1. So then we get our final answer, y equals negative 2. And then let's write our final answer as x comma y, where x comes first, the 4, then our y, which is negative 2. So then this is your final answer here. One solution, if you graphed it, they would be intersecting, crossing at that point, 4 comma negative 2. Okay, let's go on to our next one. Number 4. So which equation, first one or second one, which equation has the coefficient of invisible 1? The first one or the second one? Which equation has the coefficient of invisible 1? And for this one, our first equation has the coefficient of invisible 1. Our first equation has the coefficient of invisible 1, and actually both the x and the y have a coefficient of invisible 1. You can actually eliminate either one of these, but for this one, let's eliminate the positive 5x. Or sorry, let's eliminate our x values. So in order to do that, we need to figure out what is the opposite of positive 5x. Opposite of positive 5x is, or sorry, opposite of positive 5, no x. Opposite of positive 5 is negative 5. So let's distribute this negative 5 to the entire equation. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. And then negative 5 times positive 1y is negative 5y. And then our last jump, negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15. And then I'm just going to rewrite that second equation so they're next to each other. I can see it a little bit better. 5x minus 2y equals negative 50. Now we can see our x values are opposites, so we know we're going to eliminate our x values because they're different signs and the same number. So we're eliminating our x values. They're gone. Now we can start adding up the rest of our equation. Negative 5y plus negative 2y. What is negative 5y plus negative 2y? Negative, negative, same signs, add and keep. Add those numbers and keep the negative, so you get a negative 7y. Bring down the rest of the equal sign, and then our next section here, we have 15 plus negative 50. 15 plus negative 50, they're different signs, so you subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So subtracting 50 minus 15 is 35. The larger number is 50, so we get a negative 35. And let's keep on going. Divide by negative 7. So then y equals negative divided by a negative is positive, and then 35 divided by 7 is 5. Okay, so we got our first part, y equals 5. Let's go ahead and finish the rest. Let's pick our easier equation. I know you guys are good at this part, and the easier equation for this one is the first one, x plus y equals negative 3. But again, like I said, you can still use that second equation if you wanted to. It just has a little bit more numbers and more work. So as long as you do the math correct, you can pick either one, you'll still get the right answer. I'm going to take this 5 and plug it into our y value and rewrite x plus 5 equals negative 3. Go ahead and finish the rest. We need to get rid of that plus 5, so I'm going to do the opposite, minus 5 on both sides. So then x equals negative 3 minus 5, negative, negative, same signs, add and keep. So add those numbers, keep the negative. So we get x equals negative 8. And let's write down our final answer, x comma y. X comes first of negative 8, then the y, which is 5. So your final answer, if you were to graph this, they would be intersecting with one solution at negative 8, 5. Okay, so there's one more question left. I'm going to zoom out so you guys can see everything all at once. There's one more question left. What I want you guys to do is try number 5 on your own today, just that one last question. Go ahead and try number 5 if you want to stay on this chat. And then you can ask me questions when you're finished with it. If you get stuck on something, feel free to do that. But today, your assignment is just to finish number 5. This last question on your own, and then you can actually check your answer. I have the answer for these notes, and all of the work is actually posted on Schoology, so you can check to make sure that you did every single step correct. But I don't want you to just copy it down because you're not learning from that. I want you to actually try it on your own and then go back and check your work. Okay, so that is your assignment for today. Just finish number 5. And then once you're all done with that, you are all finished for my class today. If you have no questions for me, you can go ahead and log out and finish number 5. Or if you wanted to stay on and ask me some questions, I will be here. Okay, so go ahead and finish the rest of these notes, and that is it for today.